So maybe we let Jake to start this officially.
Session that will be given by Minna. So welcome all to that. Of course, we're all here to continue to honor the lifetime accomplishments of Erno. And we continue now in this second season of ELOC Talks by having a series of talks by Erno's former PhD students who have become professors in various places around the world. And of course, Minna is one of them. So we're excited to have her speak. Yeah, so the schedule for today, as always, we'll have an opening and introduction, which is happening right now. Then Minna will give about a 45-minute presentation, give or take a few minutes. From what I understand, there's plenty to talk about, so we'll see how that goes. And then there will be a discussion and reflections between Erno and Minna. And then we'll have some small group discussion or whole group discussion, depending on the number of participants, with breakout rooms if necessary for about 10 or 15 minutes. And then we'll all come back together. As just a reminder, you can find previous ELOC talks on our YouTube channel or then through the ELOC link. So we have quite a number at this point. And so this will be the 12th actually. So you can go back and find those. We also warmly recommend or also suggest if you could find a way to introduce those in your teaching in any way, to go ahead and do that. We've found that to be really useful. For instance, I use Roger Celia and Elspeth Stern's lectures in one of my courses, and also Lieben's talk. So yeah, check out those. Yes, but today we're having Minna Hannula-Sormunen, professor of at the Department of Teacher Education, University of Turku, Turun yliopisto. And the title of her talk is The Origins and Educational Implications of Spontaneous Mathematical Focusing Tendencies, which of course we're all very much looking forward to hearing. So welcome, Minna, I guess we can say. Yeah, so just as an introduction to Minna, we can start with the numbers, but I think one of the most important numbers is the number of research groups and studies that have been carried out that have examined spontaneous mathematical focusing tendencies. And this number is constantly on the rise, and you can see that it is spreading throughout the world. And I think it's a really impressive accomplishment that Minna and Erno have been able to kind of start this whole line of research and really expanding the realm with which we examine mathematical development and individual differences. So no matter, I think, any of the other numbers, this is a particularly meaningful accomplishment and should be celebrated in many ways. But of course, there are the traditions that we have in this colloquium. And so first we'll note that over her career, Minna has acquired 831 citations in Scopus. She's published over 43 articles that are indexed in Scopus with 53 co-authors. So quite a wide range of collaborators. But the numbers, of course, don't give away nearly all that we are as people. And we also like to examine the words that we can use to describe our speakers. The first word that comes to mind when I think of Minna, of course, is ingenuity. I initially spelled this with an E, but I think that this is no more clearly represented by her work this past week in helping to create the world's largest ice donut carousel. And here she is, hard at work, using the chainsaw to cut away the ice to make this ice carousel. And I'm imagining right now that she's probably laughing, because that's another thing that I think of when I think of Minna, is that she is quick to laugh, and it's a pleasure to work with her, and because of that, that there's no, yeah. As well as we can see from Erno and Minna's work, that there is absolutely no lack of originality in terms of the ability to develop new perspectives on learning, which I think is quite a valuable trait. But I think that alone is not necessarily something that makes a brilliant scientist, and I do believe that Minna is a brilliant scientist, and I think that one of the things that she mostly pairs this originality with, that makes it so powerful, is being a careful scientist, in the sense that not only are we kind of exploring new avenues of individual differences in learning, but also doing so in a way that is careful, that leads to these long-lasting impacts in research. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Minna, and look forward to hearing your talk.
Wow, thank you, Jake. And yeah, incredible picture as well. So I'm going to kind of talk about the origins and educational implications of SFOM. And here are two nice pictures of our birthday boy and of Erno, whom we are celebrating with this ELOC series. So thank you, Erno, for accepting our little present, as this was it originally. This is how it has been.
Hello.
With Erno, like we have been rowing together as a group very nicely and comfortably throughout these more than 20 years now. So I was thinking about the top 3 moments of these years. What would they be? And the first one that I thought as top moment of my journey with you has been when I got a text message. You were skiing in Norway, and I got a text message suddenly into my cell phone, Nokia, of course, and it said Spelke on pulkassa. So Spelke, Elizabeth Spelke is in the sledge. That meant that she had agreed to act as a preliminary examiner of my PhD thesis. That was a big moment. In the beginning, it was really not sure at all that anything that we were doing together around SFON was something at all. And it was very nice to get Liz Spelke to review my thesis. That was a nice moment. Then another nice moment was when I was in an early conference 2007 in Hungary, in Budapest, and I got a phone call from you when you said, "Where are you?" And I said, "Well, I'm in a hotel." I was taking a nap in the middle of an early conference, and you were saying that they have now decided to give us the outstanding award of early for our article together about SFON. That was quite a crazy moment, and thank you for that. And then the third kind of a best moment was when I asked you in our party that we were having in a Turku castle, and I asked from you what was the best moment, the best thing that I have ever done, according to you. And you gave a response, Vaakku is the best thing I have ever made in my life. So that was like a super fun and great moment. So thank you, Erno, for all those moments and all the kind of other kinds of moments too. It's been a crazily fun and exciting journey together with you. So along the way, since the beginning, we had the SFON tendencies, spontaneous focusing on numericity, but after that there has appeared quite many relatives or cousins for our SFON, like SFOR, SFONs, SFOP, SFONO, that is coming up. So thank you, Lieven and others in KU Leuven for starting up several spontaneous focusing tendency research paradigms there that has started to broaden what we started more than 20 years ago. So I thought kind of to think about like what are the origins of these tendencies, like where to start. And as a little gift for you, Erno, I wonder if you remember still the very first task measuring spontaneous focusing on numericity. And I have a little video clip of this. This is from the middle of the task in a way, like doesn't start from the beginning.
Sitten mitä mä teen näin. Tee sinä ihan samalla tavalla kuin mä teen. Noin. Kato sitten mitä mä teen. Mä teen näin. Ja näin. Ja näin. Tee sinä ihan samalla tavalla.
I wouldn't recommend you to try this at home, like it wasn't yet the perfect kind of a SFON measure, but it started something. So what we were thinking, or mostly what you, Erno, were thinking in the beginning when we started, like we were wondering about what explains large individual differences in children's number skills at the beginning of the school. And then bit by bit, we started developing this hypothesis that what if children would differ in how easily they pay attention to number aspect in their surroundings, and this way would acquire practice, and this practice would be improving their early number skills. And what if there would be this kind of separate attentional process that would trigger numerical cognition? So these were the starting kind of thoughts of ours. So the basic idea is that math is in principle everywhere in our around us, but apparently it's the case that it's not that way for all of us and all the time. For example, if we have this very simple question of how many, and you explore that by using this kind of stimuli, you might be saying 4 quite easily. But what if we would be using something from everyday life surroundings, like how does the world look like around us, and ask how many? It might be more difficult for you to decide like how many of what. you immediately notice that imagine everyday situations with the social aspects in it, like you have to define the set on some basis, and you have to really know how many of what you are kind of enumerating, or even do you focus on this fluffy dog, or do you focus on the aspect of number is another question. So how can exact number of items be recognized? Like this is at the core of spontaneous mathematical focusing tendencies, that we have to always think of like what mathematical aspect are we recognizing, or what mathematical quality are we recognizing, and how focusing tendency is related, what sort of part of this recognition process are we talking about? Like if we talk about exact number recognition, there are at least 3 different, or probably exactly 3 different types of number recognition skills: subitizing, counting, and groupitizing. So subitizing is the fast parallel process, and counting is a serial one that takes longer time, and you need reciting number words and so on and so forth. Groupitizing is something like you would be counting 2, 4, 6, 8. So adding up small groups that you first are subitizing. So those kinds of things. But none of these, not even subitizing, appears to be totally automatic or pre-attentional process. So it needs triggering, and this is very crucial. Like mathematical thinking about exact qualities, mathematical qualities, is not totally automatic. It needs to be triggered. Otherwise, we would be all the time continuously kind of seeing numbers of items around us, or recognizing different mathematical aspects. That's not the case. So there is something extra that is needed. I would recommend you to kind of read about Raphael Nunes' model of quantical cognition, as he describes it, because it kind of defines pretty nicely like where we are with these not totally automatic number recognition skills, because the quantical large quantity discrimination and not precise non-symbolic recognition processes are shared with many animals. And when we start going towards human skills, there's a symbolic reference. So number, like mathematical words, are used to attach with concepts, and that's when actually cultural processes start taking place. So whenever the number and arithmetics come into play, that is culturally based skills. So that means that what are the origins of spontaneous mathematical focusing tendencies? They are heavily in culture, but not only in culture, but it has also some biological basis. So the theory of like what we think what are the mechanisms, developmental mechanisms that are linked to spontaneous focusing tendencies, mathematical focusing tendencies. First of all, it seems like these produce individual differences in numeracy development or mathematical development. And very important thing is that only kind of a small part of fundamental mathematical development takes place in adult guided situations or mathematics lessons and so on. And we have been all the time like wondering about the role of child's or students' own spontaneous activities when they actually use their mathematical skills in everyday situations. So those children who learn to focus on more and more advanced mathematical aspects, they seem to be reciprocally developing their mathematical skills so that one leads to a better skill in another. And this is a culturally based, educationally based issue. So these kind of theoretical ideas there are now. So spontaneous focusing on numericity, what it is, this is the definition that we have been using. So it's a separate attentional process. And there's another part like focusing part and then using part, using of exact number knowledge in one's action. And then us appeared with a dog versus the dots picture. Using knowledge of exact numbers requires focusing attention on number and also carving up the set based on some qualities. So it's not totally automatic. And then another thing, sorry, actually the half part, don't yet focus on this part. So the SFON tendency part, like we have been with Erno-U, we have been all the time trying to find out or create measurements that we have several different tasks by which we could get a good indicator how easily children would focus on number in everyday situations. That's why we need many different tasks to measure it. And we have been able to show some kind of stability across different tasks. But there's also this kind of interesting development of looking at task differences and indicator differences, whether you look at only the verbal expressions of focusing on number, or whether you take the actions into account when you decide whether the focus has been on number or not. And then the thing that is hopefully coming up one day as a publication, I sincerely hope, is that with Erno-U, we have been talking a lot about whether SFON or SFOM tendencies are rather these kind of second order factors that that would kind of be, I think it would make much more sense than starting to take separate SFON or SFOM tasks and starting looking at it in a traditional way. But this is a suggestion, and maybe we will be able to get further with that. One question that was once, I think it was in KU Leuven, or actually, I think it was in Leuven, where a question in one conference was asked by Camilla Gilmore, I think, was that aren't these fun tasks just enumeration measures? Like if you're really good at enumerating then, or bad at that, like it would be basically the same. So is SFON really a separate process from enumeration? And that's when we kind of started to investigate it, and we kind of were looking at how the typical enumeration task accuracies would kind of look like, the distributions, and that would be something like this. And then we looked at our old kind of SFON tasks. This is the imitation, and this is another imitation task. And what if these would be used as enumeration accuracy measures? And then here's the response patterns in SFON imitation tasks, which show that clearly it's not the case that the distributions would look like the same. So these tasks do not seem to work as enumeration skill measures. It is something different. Also, of course, our guided measures that we have been using are kind of showing towards the same thing. So with Jake and Jenny and Michelle, we made this kind of a model of what is needed and what is linked to spontaneous mathematical focusing tendencies. And there we were thinking about like we need requisite skills like mathematical knowledge and skills and other cognitive skills that are needed in a task situation. Then contextual factors like perceptual salience, social goals, and that which affect the situation when we are measuring SFORM. And I also recommend you to some nice reviews, by the way, Lieven and others there. But like now I'm going to go towards this model and the specifics. Like what predicts SFORM? Like if we think about the origins of SFORM or SFORM, like starting from SFORM, like what predicts it? This is a special treat for you, Erno. Like I did a new analysis of our old origins data where we had the 5-year-old measures. We have like 136 kids in here, and at the age of 6 years we had 3 SFORM tendency measured by 3 tasks, and this much is explained. And then you see like if we enter here these skills, and object counting is now here, and then we have something here. I will hear later maybe, Erno, like what you guessed for this, but maybe I reveal it. What is the kind of a cool thing that predicts SFORM? It's phonemic awareness, which is kind of cool because in the early days, I remember, Erno, when we talked quite many times when we started to explain what this phone might be like. It is like phonemic awareness, like when you start focusing on the structure of the words instead of only kind of focusing on the meanings of the words. And kind of funny that this phonemic awareness skill seemed to be predicting SFORM tendency. All right. So also Melissa Libertus and others have been looking at what predicts SFORM, and they have found out that children's SFORM through their actions was significantly predicted by prior math skills, their TEMA scores especially, whereas SFORM through speech wasn't. So there are some differences in these indicators used to assess or indicate SFORM, which is kind of interesting. They used this our old dinosaur model task in there. So what's the nature of the relation between SFORM and math skills? I was able to find some models like our old model, which shows reciprocal nature of the SFORM and counting skills from the age of 3.5 to the age of 6. And then we have our SFOR, spontaneous focusing on quantitative relations, that is seems to be reciprocally related to rational number conceptual knowledge. And then there was also the first attempt in the spontaneous focusing on number symbols by Lieven and Sanne and Joke and Bert in KU Leuven, where it wasn't yet successful that much. But in their study with a picture task, they were able to show that SFORM was kind of little bit reciprocally related to math achievement. But they were using these picture tasks that are modeled there. So there's some indications that maybe there's a reciprocal development going on. What other factors may be affecting spontaneous mathematical focusing tendencies? First, Erno, again, do you remember what we have been talking about Piagetian tasks, like this classical one, like which has more? I just took this from there. There's pretty cool studies by Arnaud I noticed that you are there, so I'm happy that you were joining us. Like Arnold and his colleagues have been able to show what we were pondering, whether that would be the case, that also focusing on irrelevant non-numerical dimensions affect whether they focus on the exact number aspect, which is kind of exactly what we were thinking in the old days. Then also Michel Masocco and Jenny Jean have been doing research on this kind of selection task, in which they have been manipulating different competing aspects, like aspects that compete with the aspect of number, and they have been able to show that contextual influences actually, well, context influences on how easily you would focus on number, which is cool. This we have been actually using, these kinds of things we have been using in designing our intervention studies. If you're more interested in this, I would guide you to go and look at Jenny's and Michel's 2 papers. This is especially kind of interesting, methods in psychology, where they describe how they have been recognizing from observational aspects of the tasks, the focusing on number and attention on different mathematical aspects. And if you kind of want to look more historical things, then Jonathan Tachis and Herb Ginsberg's old studies are really nice ones as well. Of course, parents' activities affect also whether a child focuses on number, and this is a very kind of a recent study that just Christina Nanu, thanks, you noticed this one, and we looked at this, and there's a kind of a picture task, and then there's a selection task, and they are able to show that parents' phone and number activities are actually related to children's phone. So we are going towards the interaction between adults and children. So then the second part of my presentation now, like what are the educational implications of spontaneous mathematical focusing tendencies? What do we know about that, and what's been done so far? I think there are some important messages. Like number one is that everything points towards that we have to take into account everyday surroundings and school surroundings and surroundings around the math books if we want to train children's mathematical skills. So everyday life is a good arena for training mathematical skills. And the second thing is that no matter if it's very small children or it's students in an older age with more advanced mathematical skills, we should first start giving the educators math classes, and you can do it this quickly and easily. There you go. I'm sure you were counting 1, 2, and 3, and 3 classes. So now you might have your number classes on that you could look at around you, and just for fun, now try to count something that you can see around you. All right, and the goal of mathematics education should be that the world would become mathematical to the kids, which is very kind of a nicely put, I think. This can be done rather quickly, and it can be measured immediately after the 5-minute intervention. So we can get the math classes on, like Melissa Libertus and her team has showed in a museum intervention by 5-minute manipulation. So their manipulation was such that the parents and the parent-child parent got either instructions to collect from a museum store, collect items with a budget of $20, I think it was, or then another group got instructions to collect healthy meal. And then they were assessing SFON before and after. And there was the significant effect of this manipulation of the instructions, and they were able to show that the children who got this kind of a budget prompt card with a parent, they showed more SFON after this 5-minute intervention. So it's easy kind of to get them temporarily the instruction, temporarily the math classes on. But what interests and has been interesting us for quite a while is the long-term effects, like could we change something in kind of permanently. So in the very first intervention that Erno and I started to design with Aino Mattinen, we started to kind of develop an intervention to try it out, like whether we generally can even affect spontaneous focusing on numericity by guiding children so that they would start focusing on number. And there were 2 studies, like a quantitative and qualitative study related, and I think now it's important to focus on also on the qualitative aspect of that, like in Aino Mattinen's doctoral dissertation, she recognized how there was this temptation for adults when they were working with the little kids, that they went along with those kids who already had some SFON tendency, while they were kind of leaving alone, more alone, those kids who were not yet focusing numerically. And it was, especially in those days, like it was not clear for the adults that how it is possible not to notice such kind of clear things as numbers in those simple practices. But this interaction of children and adults seem to be creating these kind of vicious circles, that those who have more get more and those who don't get even less, which wasn't that optimal, I think. Since then, like we did a new round of interventions, like it was 15 years after the first one, and it's been it's coming up in these 2 papers. One is out and one is coming. And in those I just mentioned a few activities that we have been using. We have created these kind of SFON attractors, like here you can see this is a designed SFON attractor, and here's a natural SFON attractor. When we have similar items close to each other, they can be very kind of in a plain background and symmetrically placed, and you can manipulate. You can take out items and you can put there more items to make the number aspect more apparent for the children. We have had guided number related play, like here's a vegetable market going on. And very important aspect of these early interventions has been that early educators have started to focus on numbers of items in all possible everyday situations. Here's, for example, a picture where closet has been opened and wow, there are 2 towels in it, like to notice like how many things are anywhere. And this we were training like spawning or guided focusing on number together with cardinality recognition skills. So we were asking, or the educators were asking how many questions, a lot. And I think one very crucial thing here is that we were focusing on supporting transfer right from the start, like using number recognition skills in children's own meaningful play and activities, and not really trying to drill or practice skills as isolated activities. And one very important aspect that when we get it going nicely, it's doing good for children's skills is when children in the group and adults are all kind of appreciating the aspect of number and using that together. They talk about it together, they get excited about it together, and so on and so forth. And the take-home message from these interventions, first of all, yes, we were able to show some intervention effects on SFON and cardinality related skills, but also that combining SFON and math skill training is a good idea, I believe, and using everyday moments, especially with the young children. Then adults need good math classes and quite a bit of knowledge about how these skills appear, how they develop, so that they can efficiently promote kids' skills. Then there has been SFOR interventions as well, like spontaneous focusing on quantitative relations. There's a nice example of results in that with the Jake, and others we have been doing using action track to take photos and explain others about mathematical relations. And then the latest is with the Saku Määttä, is the main character here with the Jake and Saku, and then our big team in Growing Mind project where activities has been designed and kind of tailored more and more from the first one, where recognition and description of quantitative relations in specific pictures, everyday pictures, and also everyday surroundings have been used. And there's kind of a nice results coming up as well. We call it Spot the Mathematical Relations intervention. And here it was relevant that we had the control condition that was playing a fraction game in which the number line representation was used. This is Number Trace by Christian Kieli and his group. Then lastly, this has led to developing in-service training for early educators that we have done in Finland. And we have created this kind of Pikkumatikka courses. Pikkumatikka is little math. And then we have flexible mathematical thinking in-service training courses where we have integrated these ideas as well, where the transfer is everything and flexibility is everything. Like the courses for primary school teachers and secondary school teachers have been very popular as well. So here you can see some aspects of these in-service trainings, like our Pikkumatikka online courses, what a Pikkumatikka expert is doing, like he or she notices math moments, recognizes math skills, adjusts guidance according to children's skills, and gets excited together. And notices that Pikkumatikka or math is everywhere, and use very much of these opportunities for counting and mathematical thinking. And then, which is on top of everything, which I'm really excited, is that we have now a 2-year preschool program experiment going on in Finland, like a nationwide, thousands of children and hundreds of daycare and preschool groups participating. And here the math curriculum is based on quite familiar aspects, like attention is guided towards math aspects in everyday mathematical thinking is made visible, and discoveries, all children's math readiness skills are promoted, explorative action and learning, and then everyday problem solving is in there very strongly, and also verbalizing mathematical skills. So that's where we are now with it. And then I want to say thank you to our dear research group for mathematics learning and instruction, and our Pikkumatikka team, especially Joma team. And this is how it's been and how it's worth celebrating. And from that picture that Jake shared from my last weekend activity, here are the circles on the eyes that I ended up being part of making. So, Erno, I think I'm ready for your questions.
So thank you very much, Minna. I'm happy that you had also these very early pictures from the very early phases of these research traditions. And I don't have so many, maybe also pictures, but more as comments and ideas. And but I would start with one question which you mentioned quite early, and this is one of the fundamental theoretical ideas why SWAN or these spontaneous mathematical tendencies are important, and there's the concept of self-initiated practice. So what happens then in surrounding, and I still believe that this is a very strong theoretical idea, and there's a lot of good reasons to believe that, but there's still very little kind of convincing empirical evidence of that. And maybe now my first question is that, do you have any ideas how we could get more kind of convincing empirical evidence that that what we measure in these SWAN and SWOR and other test situations in fact describes something what children really do in everyday situations when they are playing or eating or putting clothes on or whatever. How do you have good ideas of that?
Yeah, we have done done something towards that in the first intervention study, like where we had the early educators were observing kids, and then we looked at whether their observations correlated with our SWON tasks. So that was attempt towards it, but it wasn't that kind of well done because our observers were not really skilled, like they were developing their observational skills. They were learning to recognize SWON as part of those everyday activities. So yeah, that was it. So I think that could be done better so that we would have better observers, and maybe also like we could develop such kind of activity corners in the daycare or the preschool where we could kind of have let's say that's kind of tempting activities available, and then we could look at like whether the individual differences in those activities are related.
Yes.
The problem there is that you can't see what's going on in a person's thinking by looking at the overt behavior. So
yes, and I think that this challenge becomes much more challenging if we go further from this basic swan tendency to, for example, swore tendency, it becomes more abstract and more difficult to notice, because it's more about thinking and not necessarily so clearly in activities or verbal expression. But this really is a big challenge. I think that would be very, very nice to get more information, because I know that it has been challenged, that this kind of theoretical conclusion we have made about self-initiated practice, that there is so little empirical evidence of that. But I think it's still a strong theoretical claim, but really needs more empirical evidence. But then, I was so happy because that you had this kind of re-evaluation of this one data set, and were able to show the phonemic awareness relationship. And because in many discussions during these almost 20 years, when these concepts have been presented, people have asked that is it only about mathematics? And it seems to be clear for many people that there are also in other fields this kind of tendencies, that some people become very interested in something and then recognize these kind of instances of that in everyday situation much more than other students. But still, I think that there is something very special in the mathematical focusing tendencies, but something which is very similar with phonemic awareness, because there we have something which is continuously present, but the mathematical aspect is abstract aspect of that. And that's the same in phonemic awareness, that children can listen spoken language all the time, but then the phonemic awareness is kind of abstract aspect of that, which requires something more than just listening the spoken language, and that's why it's really I'm very happy that this result is there, because that was our theoretical hypothesis, that there is the similarity. And very early on, we had an idea to start looking at more with Pekka Niemi, who very much focused on the phonemic awareness question, but unfortunately we never did that, and so that's not too late. Pekka is also actually visiting universities, has been retired 6 years already, but we can try to do that. And welcome Minna with us.
Yeah, it was hard to keep that inside, like last week or a few days ago, when I noticed that I can have a look, because yes, like we have that data and it's been sitting there like quite a long time. Yeah.
Yes, but then it would be very interesting to look at other fields where we have the similar situation, that this kind of surface level stimuli is all the time there, so that children can listen it or see it or manipulate or work with that. But there is the opportunity to go beyond the surface level with some abstract concepts, and if similar tendencies to go beyond this surface level can be found also in other fields. I think that, and that we have been discussing about that already, that in music there is probably something which is similar, and some other fields, and for sure in foreign languages there, listening foreign languages already before you know the foreign language might have something similar, but this is
and my favorite thing, orienteering, of course, like
yes,
map reading. Yeah,
sure.
there's the same thing.
that's very interesting to think about, and maybe also to experiment empirically if we can find something similar in other fields, and if they also predict in such a strong way. Of course, the whole phonemic awareness is the classical case, that it's very strongly predicting later reading, later learning to read, and low phonemic awareness is one of the predictors of reading difficulties. So, okay.
But then have to say, like, there's also this exciting shared component that predicts both reading and mathematical skills in the early age. So
yes, and that of course there's a lot of evidence of that there are some, let's say, kind of general cognitive capacity kind of features which enables strong kind of achievement in both learning and mathematics, and that's of course also interesting thing that if these focusing tendencies have something to do that, because there has been so strong prediction that the mathematical language is important predictor of later learning, and then the relationship between the use of mathematical language with the spontaneous focusing tendencies is interesting, and is it also a reciprocal question? So I can imagine that it's not only from language to the tendency, but probably also from spontaneous focusing tendencies to the development and also the kind of frequency of to use.
Yeah, it was interesting. Like, I think in the two of those studies I showed in this presentation, like they had been investigating the relationship between math talk and then SFON measures, verbal SFON measures, and not able to kind of consistently see the relation being significant. Unlike math talk and SFON based on actions. So that's like Melissa's and their study about actions speak louder than words. That package is pretty neat in that respect. But of course, it depends on what kind of tasks you are using there. Like our imitation tasks are not really, they don't require verbal anything. So you can do it silently like a Finn.
Yes. Okay, but this is in a way a challenge in all studies when we look at spontaneous focusing tendencies in relation to something, because measuring spontaneous focusing tendencies so that we always get the same results is a challenge, because this is something which where it is natural that sometimes we notice that tendency, sometimes we don't, and it doesn't. If you don't notice this, it doesn't mean that child do not have it, but it happened that at that moment that child was not kind of applying her or his tendency in that concrete situation, so that there is sometimes humid in the math classes that you don't see clearly.
Yeah.
Yes, but that's of course in this kind of skills, and I think that from the beginning this has been a challenge also when these concepts has been presented for the scientific community, because the tradition, or particularly the psychometric tradition, has focused on something which where it is clear that if you have certain type of task, then if person have the skill, then the skill is immediately applied in that task. That's not something what we can expect in when we speak about spontaneous focusing tendencies. And this has been, and I think will also in future be a communication problem with particularly the psychometric tradition, people who are very strongly oriented to the psychometric tradition.
Yeah, it's kind of surprising how hard it has been to to get the others understanding that there is this phase needed. Like not everyone all the time recognizes exact numbers, for example. Like and children even less so. Like you have to initiate it. So like when the theories about how counting skills develop, for example, still don't seem to take into account this aspect of self-initiated practice, or this aspect of like you don't do it automatically and you have to learn to use these skills. But I think it's very relevant for the other mathematical skills as well, that where can you apply your skills, and how can you recognize everyday situations or non-mathematical situations as such that you can use your mathematical thinking skills there.
Yes, and of course there is, this reminds me about much more general question of testing something, so that when we apply, for example, traditional intelligence tests, the expectation is that all the people who are taking the test are orienting to the test situation in the similar way. The main task is to solve the task so good as possible. But this is a very unrealistic expectation, and there should be much kind of more many-sided theory what test taking means. And of course this type of tasks, test tasks that we used in measuring spontaneous focusing tendencies, it is absolutely necessary to understand that there are so many things which can have influence the results.
Social conventions, like what we have been talking this week with in our Sphono group, like what kind of conventions there can be that can inhibit you of looking at from a new perspective.
Sure. Yes. Then one issue you commented in when you discussed about the later intervention studies was this that because in the early studies it was very important to try to keep the SWON's training separate from training mathematical skills, because the idea was to look if increasing SWON tendency has results in improving math skills, which was of course theoretically very important, but then in practical situation it means that should not be the case, but it's much more realistic, I think, to combine the training, because it's easier to make the training if you combine them, but also if you think that you have a stronger tendency to focus on mathematical aspect in the environment, it would be make that experience stronger if you also have better skills to deal with the mathematical aspects of your environment, which again make this tendency stronger and so on. So that this I liked very much that that you mentioned it explicitly, that it's probably important to think in this way. Okay, and then yes.
I think actually, hi everyone. Jumping into take over sharing, I guess. But actually, I think maybe it would be time to move to breakout rooms, unless you had something you really wanted to wrap up with there. No, it's a fascinating discussion, and I'm having to hold my tongue a lot. So sure, there's others who have, But did you have something you wanted to wrap up with?
No. I think that it's important that other people have also the opportunity to say something.
All right, so I'm ready with my question for the breakout room. So I thought you could help us out by thinking what other spontaneous mathematical focusing tendencies others than are mentioned now there might be, like what topics there could be.
I just will echo actually what Hannula said, because that's one of the things we talked about at the very end, is this, kind of looking at what goes on also in situations in everyday life that have some explicit mathematicalness to them, but then how they see sort of the more complex, the relations that are embedded that aren't necessarily on the surface or pointed out, but then, are very advantageous for reasoning.
Yes. And Susan pointed to present a very interesting idea of kind of thinking about measurement, so that if we are in a concrete situation, can we also kind of let's say organize the situation or deal with it in terms of measurements, so that we could already before we are actually measuring it.
Realizing that that's irrelevant. Yes. Hilma mentioned equality, and thinking about sharing and all sorts of contexts where things are equal or not, and that's a
Okay, I think it's time to say thank you, Erno, for your comments and discussion, and thank you everyone for joining us today, and thank you, Jake, now for your really fun introduction. That was very sweet. Thank you. Bye everyone, and thank you.
Okay, bye, and thank you, Minna.
Thank you, Minna.
Thanks, Minna. Thanks, Erno.
Thank you, Minna. Bye.